Oh my goodness, the machining. Oh, those rivets. Oh, and the knobs. Oh, they feel so good. Those knobs feel great. Oh, and this shaft and everything's just... Oh, hi there. You see, there's something I need to tell you. I only have this for the weekend, and so we're gonna have to be really quick. Now, the owner of this mount did make me promise that there would be no lewd comments, there would be no disrespectful remarks about his baby. So, this is gonna be a 100% PG rated review of the 10Micron GM1000 HPS. Let's get started. Hello again, Internet. Astro with Roro here. And do I have a special one for you today? This right here is the GM1000 HPS mount by 10Micron. And it was loaned to me by my good friend Dreaming Astro for a weekend. Now, Steve has some fantastic images over on his Instagram that he's taken using this mount. And you can see all of those and find a link to them down in the description. If you do like this video, then please go and send him some love as a thank you for him providing this gear for me to review so that you can all learn about it. Now let's start with the build quality and fit and finish of this enthusiast mount. Yes, this mount is very well built. I mean, every piece of it just fits together nicely and you can tell has had love and thought put into precisely where it should be. I mean, just listen to this. Ooh. You can really tell that a lot of time and energy went into designing and crafting this machine. I think the fit and the finish of this mount looks really nice. I mean, this labeling right here, really enjoy that design style, this sort of brushed black finish. It is just beautiful. Now let's go over some quick stats and then I'll show you the full setup and tear down of this beast. This mount head weighs in at just shy of 20 kilos, and that's excluding the counterweights and the counterweight bar, but it has a rated payload capacity of 25 kilos, and that is a lot of payload. Now, I don't have anything nearly that heavy to show you here today, but I can say that this mount has had no issues throwing around my heaviest setup, which probably pushes around the 15 to 16 kilo mark fully laden. In fact, it was honestly scary just how easily this managed to do so. It has a very good latitude range, starting from 0 degrees up to 82 degrees, and there is an option to get you up to 9 degrees if you need that. When setting up, each item has its own individual carry case, and things are laid out nicely. One very minor issue that I have though is that the main carry case, which takes on this mount head here, has very short grab handles. This is a strange choice from 10Micron, as this bag is the biggest and heaviest of the lot, with that full mount head in it as well as a counterweight bar. And honestly, a shoulder strap or more comfortable handles would have gone a long way. Instead, I found it easiest to hold the bag with a big chest hug grip if you need to walk very far with it. Otherwise, yes, you can take the handles, but be warned, it will take a bit of a toll on your hand. So let's now get into setting up this device. Now, there are a range of tripods that you can use with this mount, but Steve has decided to pair it with this, the Geoptic Hercules tripod. And he's also got this little half pier here, which I must say, this is a nice looking coupling. And yeah, it's very solid. Once you do have the tripod of your choice set up, and whether you decide to go with or without a pier, then you're ready to put the mount head on it. But I do have to admit, this is where things get a little tricky, and perhaps the biggest downside of this mount. It is really difficult to move the mount head from the box onto the tripod. And that's because, as far as I understand the manual and the reading of it, and what Steve told me, the mount head must be transported and lifted out with the clutches disengaged. This means that both axes of the mount head can freely rotate, and because of the precise machining and wonderful nature of this mount, they rotate very freely. This makes getting it out of the box and up onto here while you're trying to cradle that 19.5 kilo mount head very difficult and uncomfortable. So I'm going to show you in real time what it's like for me to take the mount head out of the box down here and get it up onto here so that you can understand what we need to go through to get it set up. Okay, so got it now, but I need to rearrange it because this mount head is just going to flop all over the place. And in fact, I think it's best to move it here around so that, there we go. So if I'm holding this here, you can see just how easily and freely this mount head rotates. Fortunately, it does have a stop in both directions like this, so you can kind of use that to your advantage. But then you got to kind of get it up here and make sure that, there we go. Whew. Then I think what's best next is to make sure that these azimuth screws are lightly attached to the back there to give it some rigidity. Next up though, we're going to screw it into the tripod here. So let me grab those screws. There are 4 of them in total, 1 on either side here, and 1 at the front and the back. Now you don't want to do these up completely tightly just yet because you do still need to do your polar alignment, and if you crank these down too hard, then that polar alignment adjustment might be a little bit more difficult because you are clamping it down. That's the friction that will stop it. So just finger tight at the moment is more than enough, and you can see that holds it just fine. Now, just to show you again how freely this mount spins, if I just give it a little push in this direction here, there you go. Wow, look at that. So yes, in both directions, it is very, very fluid, and it just really makes it difficult to do that initial lifting out of the box. So I'm just going to lightly tap down these clutches here to give it a bit of rigidity, not fully clamp them down yet, but just to lightly hold it while we do the next thing, which is putting on the counterweight shaft. Now we have a really nice long silver shaft here, and I really like this silver and black look that 10Micron have gone on, and this is definitely quite a hefty and thick shaft. Now to see how nicely and well machined it is as well, we can just, yeah, that inserts beautifully into the mount there, and we can just screw that shaft all the way in, and wow, it goes, certainly does go quite deep there. So there we have the shaft on there, the counterweight shaft. Now there is one more thing in the standard bag, and that is the altitude knob. So I'm just going to place this really big, nice knob here on the front, and there we go. Now we have our altitude adjustments here. Really nice and easy to adjust the altitude. You can get extremely precise because the knob is just so big on the front here. Now, I will also say before we go and put the rest of the gear on the mount that I do like how 10Micron has actually put a bubble level on the base of the mount head here. And Geoptic also have put a bubble level on the tripod. So we actually have 2 bubble levels, and they've even made it so it's visible with the half pair on. So nice work, Geoptic. So now we're going to attach some counterweights, and I have 2 counterweights here. Just going to slide this counterweight up this shaft here, make sure that it's completely loosened there, and oh, that is satisfying every time I do that. Now normally there is a counterweight lock on the bottom here, but I believe Steve was fiddling with the shaft too much and I managed to lose that. So unfortunately we're just going to have to hope that these counterweights hold themselves, and yeah, they're fine. Still so satisfying. Just going to make sure they're nicely locked down here so that we don't have any falling on any feet. Now, first part of cabling is attaching the control unit, and it comes in this nice little black bag here with a carry handle. You can unvelcro the front and actually re-velcro it to the back, which gives it a nice little padded back here. Now, the best place that I've seen used for this is hooking it over this here, this little knob here. Lots of knobs on this mount, and then it just sits really beautifully in the tripod here, and all of your cabling works really nicely. The first cable we're going to connect is the mount head to the control box with this cable here. Just slides really nicely in and then threads in there. And then it's similar down here for the control box. There we go. Now, this part of the mount does not move, so this cable is perfectly fit here and not going to move during the night, so nothing to worry about there. Next up, we're going to attach the power. So once again, the power does connect onto the back here of the control unit. There we go. And that attaches down there. I have found that the attachment method of the power isn't nearly as nice as that of the control cable. And we will come back to this power. We'll talk about this a bit more in a minute. But for now, just going to leave that down there. Finally, we do have a GPS device here. This is a really nice GPS device. It's worked perfectly every time I've tried to use it. Got a good signal, and the lat long does just come through nicely. Plugs into the GPS device here, and that can then just sit under here and get our GPS location. Then last but not least, you will want an Ethernet cable. I found that the Ethernet cable is the best way to connect this mount to your computer. And there's just a little LAN port here. Plug it in there, and then this end goes into your NUC, which I'll be connecting shortly, and we'll discuss how to connect and control this mount via your computer. Now, of course, this mount does have a hand controller, and let me tell you, it is hefty. But of course, we're doing astrophotography here, not visual, so this is going straight back in the bag. But look, I'm sure it works great if you do need to use it. I just don't, and find it much simpler to go straight into the computer using the ASCOM driver and that Ethernet cable that we talked about earlier. Speaking of connecting directly, there is a USB that 10Micron will send you that has all of the manuals and instructions and software required. No, you cannot get this online officially. If you lose that USB, I guess you have to ask them to ship you another one. So I don't know if this is against terms and conditions and the service and everything, but I would highly recommend that when you get this mount, you do make a backup of that USB, because you wouldn't want to lose all of that. It is vital for this mount, and yeah. Now, once you do open that USB up, you can follow the instructions on there to get set up. And what you'll find is when you install the ASCOM device, it's actually very simple. You do need to assign an IP address to the mount and to your computer. But once you've done that, it just picked it up really quickly in Nina, which is the imaging software that I use. In fact, we'll go over exactly all of those details in a minute. Now, before we do, the mount does have some rather peculiar power requirements. You see, 10Micron states that you must use an approved power adapter with this mount. And one of those is right here. You see, if you don't, 10Micron says that you void the warranty. And honestly, this irks me a lot. You see, this power adapter right here is not cheap. In fact, it costs nearly 200 Australian dollars, and it doesn't seem to do anything unusual or interesting or special. It simply takes the 12-volt input from this cigarette lighter and converts it to 24 volts, which is what this mount runs off. And normally, I would be fine with that. However, this ends up taking up one of your power slots. And most batteries, especially the consumer grade ones, only have one or two, and usually only one cigarette lighter slot. But you see, this mount doesn't have any power output, so you must use this power adapter, and there is no other way to power the mount. So that means you plug this into your power box or your battery, but then you need to find another way to power the rest of your gear, because there's no output here. There's no way for you to use this to power the mount and then piggyback and have pass-through power from the mount to your gear. And oh, you see, it's just, I just think it could have been done better. And when you're paying this much money for an mount, it really would have been nice for 10Micron to allow pass-through, or perhaps allow more options to connect this power brick. You see, this is not even detachable here. So if you want to use a wall socket, you have to buy another $200 one. If you want to use your own, DC input that isn't a cigarette lighter, well, you can't. You have to use either a cigarette lighter or a wall socket. And to me, that's a little disappointing. Now, while it doesn't have power pass-through, it also doesn't have data pass-through. And it's not too bad because there is a Losmandy and Vixen Dovetail connection here. So you could maybe thread some power and data underneath your connection there. But again, it would have really been nice for this kind of mount to have both data and power pass-through. But let's now get ready to put our payload on. So once again, I have tightened these clutches up here, not fully locked them down, but tighten them up. And you do want to make sure that now that we're putting weight on the top, all of these are, at least decently finger tight. So let me grab the payload here. And today I'll be putting on a Celestron 9¼ telescope. There we go. And that one's tightened down there. Now, of course, it is very important for a mount like this to be balanced correctly. So we're going to, first, I'm going to do this top axis here. So making sure that this is nicely secured. Yes, I'm going to loosen off both of the clutches here and make sure that, yes, we are balanced. Now, as I've mentioned in some of my other reviews, it is actually important to have a very slight bias in one axis. You can see when I push the mount in this one here, it stops reasonably quickly. But if I pull it back, there's a little bit of time before it stops. And that's just so, less so with this mount, but especially more entry-level mounts, you want to make sure that those teeth always have a little bit of pressure on them to engage them, so there's no slop or flop between them if you are perfectly balanced. We can then tighten this down, and once again, just making sure that, yes, we are nicely secured. Here, come around to this side and loosen off these clutches. And we're a little bit top heavy here, so there we go. Just make sure that's not perfect. So once again, a very slight weight bias to the counterweight side. And now what we can do is use this. This is a knob turner, and it is a very important tool with the 10 micron. You might call it a knob turner, a knob extender, a knob hardener, a knob toucher, but really this mount is all about the knobs. There is so many knobs on this mount, and they all need a personal touch. So here, I'm going to tighten up all of these knobs and these clutches because now we're ready to start our polar alignment. So once all of these knobs have been, there we go, nicely tightened, this is truly locked down. And you can see there really is absolutely no movement here, which is wonderful to see. So now that we're at this stage, we're going to boot up our computer, and this is traditionally where you would do your polar alignment. Now, of course, I'm indoors and I won't be polar aligning here. But once you have completed your polar alignment, it is really important to come back and make sure that all of these extra knobs here are tightened as well. And yes, you can use the knob extender to crank these down and really get a great fit all the way down. Now, before I actually put this away, Steve did also say that it's very important once you finish your polar alignment to make sure that these knobs are more than finger tight. He was saying that if they're just finger tight here, then you can actually have a little bit of slop depending how heavy your payload is up here. So once you've got it, really make sure you crank them down. And of course, you want to make sure they're cranked evenly on either side so that, once again, you don't move your polar alignment out in it all. And this just really makes sure that everything is absolutely locked into place. So with all of that, let's boot up the computer and see how this puppy performs. So one of the great things about the 10 micron is the fact that it does have a lot of information here. There is a really great plugin in Nina called 10 micron tools, which you can install, and you can see there's a lot of stuff that you can set here, from plate solving issues, minimum and maximum azimuths, min-max altitudes, all of that sort of stuff. It is really comprehensive and honestly very well laid out. If we then go into the imaging tab here, you can find a couple of things: mount info, model builder, and model. And these are all set up the top here with this, I do have to say, rather ugly 10U icon, but that is what it is. Starting with the mount info, you can see a bunch about the firmware and IP address of the mount, as well as the status of it and all of that general stuff here. Then what we can do here is look at the model. Now, the great thing about the 10 micron is it does have this model builder, which means you can build a model of the sky, live sky, where you're at, and it will give you all kinds of information in terms of your RMS error, your polar alignment error, your cone error, which is really good to know all of this kind of stuff. Now, to do this, it is very simple. You can jump into Model Builder here and create some models. There are two generations. There is sidereal path, and if we hit clear here, you can see it gets rid of it. And if we click build here, you can see it builds this model here. You can tell it how many and how far to go and what the sidereal options that you want are, as well as the rebuild options. You can also do a golden spiral model. And this is the one that I've been using quite successfully. If we generate here, what we see is this is the sky. So on the left, we have the altitude, and down the bottom, we have the azimuth. And now I've set it so that it doesn't create model points below 20 degrees because I have some stuff around here and not a perfect horizon. But if you want, you can go lower. I also personally wouldn't be shooting below 20 degrees altitude unless you have a very specific object in mind. I also told it not to go above 80 just to keep it from having any issues with collisions, but that's completely up to you. And again, this was only because of my short duration with the mount. I didn't want to risk doing anything. You can also see where we're currently pointed with this little X. You can change the number of stars you want to generate in here from a quick 10-point model all the way up to, I believe it goes to 100 points. Maybe it goes more. In fact, I haven't tried. Does it go up to 1,000 points? Let's give it a go. No, 100 points is the maximum. Good to know and validate that here, 100 points, and that is a lot of points. So if you then hit this play button, what you'll find is the mount will start slewing around and taking photos. Now, I do not recommend standing this close to this mount because watch this. But I will be quiet so you can hear it. Now that is a quick slew, and while this is a reasonably short telescope, you can understand that if you had a long refractor on here or a big Newtonian, because remember, this has a rated payload capacity of 25 kilos. That's a lot of mass moving around, and if you're nearby, it could definitely do damage. So be warned, do not stand near this when it's slewing. You will then come in here and you'll see the model, and these colors here show how good that alignment is. The red ones here, maybe there was something in the way and it didn't get a good plate solve, or maybe the RMS errors were a little bit further out and didn't expect them to be that far away due to the air mass or refraction index of the sky in that direction. All of this then comes together to create this alignment information. Talking a little bit about this mount's performance, I did a 40-star model. And after doing that 40-star model, I chose a target in Nina, clicked go to, and honestly, it was incredibly precise with its first go to. It was about 25 arc seconds out on that initial slew, and that's damn good. One minor plate solving correction later, and we were smack bang on target, which is truly exceptional to see. Now, I did use this telescope for my 2 nights that I had, except I had a hyperstar on the front. Now, the hyperstar is new to me, and I will be doing a review of it. So if you're interested in how hyperstars work and what it's like imaging at f2.2, then do make sure that you subscribe to the channel, because the review will be coming, well, once I get a few more clear nights and get some more data. However, the mount performed really well, and I didn't need any guiding at all. Now, I was only imaging at 1 to 2 minute exposure times, and that's because f2.2. anything longer than this, even at zero gain, and I was starting to see overexposure issues with my stars and images. So not a torture test of this device, but absolutely this was performing spectacularly well. And Steve has used a number of telescopes on this without guiding, and it does work well. Now, I hope you have enjoyed this video about this 10 micron mount. This truly is a marvel of engineering and production, and I've really enjoyed my time with it. Yes, it does have some unusual design choices, but all in all, this mount has performed really well for me. Now, to be fair, this mount is not cheap. In fact, I would actually say it is very expensive. Here in Australia, once you get all of the attachments and everything, you're definitely looking at over $20,000, maybe pushing $23,000, $24,000. And that's a lot of money. But if you're looking for something that has really great performance, then this really is a great mount and a great option. I think where this really would shine though as well is if you have a bit more of a permanent setup. If you did, you can create a large model, really tweak that polar alignment to perfection, and probably push that unguided performance a lot further. So unfortunately, it is time for me to pack this up and send it back to Steve. Now, if you have an interesting piece of equipment, especially if you're located in the Sydney region, then do reach out to me, link in the description below, so that we can see if I can get a review of your gear. Once again, a big thank you to Dreaming Astro and Steve for letting me borrow this. My name is Rowan, this is Astro with Roro, and clear skies.